Hello and welcome to the final episode in the Energy Transition podcast series, brought to you by ETS Pivot, your digital content hub providing business critical insights through the energy transition. My name's Owen, I head up the energy transition team here at Reuters Events, and as this series wraps up, there'll be plenty more to look forward to. Over the next few months, we'll be hosting a series of reports, interviews, a virtual Build Back Better symposium, and our inaugural energy transition summits in Europe and the US in Q4 this year. We've had brilliant engagement throughout, so thanks to everyone who's tuned in so far and the over 2,000 people who are tuned up to the session today. At times like these, it's more crucial than ever that the industry continues to come together and share insights, strategize solutions. To that regard, you do have the facility to ask questions to the panelists throughout the session, so be sure to try and kind of pop them in as we go, and I'll see how many we can get to at the end. This final episode will explore the global hydrogen economy. Hydrogen has long been touted as a crucial energy carrier in the energy system. But what role will hydrogen play within the energy mix? Can fuel cells be commercialized quickly and at scale? And how does the hydrogen economy of tomorrow look today? Joining us today, we have an industry-leading panel spanning 3 continents and with over 13 hours time difference between us. Those sharing insights include Pierre-Etienne Franck, the VP of Hydrogen Energy at Air Liquide and Co-Secretary of the Hydrogen Council, Se-Hoon Kim, Senior Vice President and the Head of the Fuel Cell Center at Hyundai. He's also co-secretary of the Hydrogen Council, and Andy Marsh, president and CEO of Plug Power. Thank you all for joining us today. To start with, I'd like to come to you, Pierre-Etienne. Thanks for joining us. We've seen a surge in hydrogen topics recently, and it seems to be all over the place now. Is this just another buzz, or is there a real change that you can see? Is it something more systemic, and is it something more real?
Well, it's true that there's been in the past all the buzz for hydrogen, but I think the situation has changed. First, I think the energy transition urgency is there now, and people see that because of the move on the good progress of the primary energy shift to renewable, even if there's still a long way to go, they look at what we call the hard-to-abate sectors, which is heavy industries, heavy transportation. And they see that there's not so much way to decarbonize those sectors. This is the first element. The second is that the growth and the scale of renewable energy development has pushed the prices down to levels which are now making hydrogen produced from electrolysis using renewable energy potentially very competitive. When you get renewable power pricing below $30 or even below $20 per megawatt hour, then hydrogen from electrolysis becomes competitive at site. Third, there is a third element, which is that I think all the key fossil players see the pressure from their financial stakeholders. They're all moving into carbon neutrality plans by 2050, and they all try to see a way to continue to develop fossil fuel in a clean way. And the only way to develop and to sell your fossil energy in a clean way is to use it through hydrogen and sequestrating carbon. And those 3 elements are fundamental. Of course, the technology costs have decreased, and I think you will speak about that with Se-Hoon and with Andy later on. But in a comparison with the last 20 years, volumes have started. We have real cars on the road, we have real forklifts, we have daily, hourly operations, and we have a very strong development of the technologies. All the key hurdles of the technology have been lifted, and the only issue now is to move to scale. So power-to-gas projects, use of hydrogen in stationary applications, using hydrogen for buses, for trucks, for forklifts, for cars, all that is running. It's very different from 15 years ago. So globally, hydrogen is the ultimate energy vector. It's going to help use renewable energy when it's there and you don't need it, to store it until you reuse it downstream into sectors that need clean energy and don't have any other ways to use it than hydrogen. It's going to be used to transport your clean energy in the future. It will probably substitute progressively LNG with LH2 or ammonia based on type of use you need from one continent to another. Is going to be used, of course, to decarbonize the downstream sectors. So all that is making that hydrogen is becoming a systemic play and not just a buzz among others. And the last sign of it is that it's not saying the crisis. You don't have so many news that have been announced over the last 2 months. But if you take on the hydrogen sphere, you've got a big news of a big investments in a liquid plant in Korea by some of our competitors. You've got another one of a very large plant in China with Sinopec. You've got another one, big joint venture between Daimler and Volvo on fuel cell for transportation. And we've got projects still ongoing. We are going to start in a couple of months the largest PEM electrolyzer with 20 megawatt as far as Air Liquide is concerned. And we're continuing to build a very large liquid plant in California. So the dynamic is still there because hydrogen will be one of the key enablers of the post-COVID era.
Sure. Yeah. No, that's a really good intro, and I think, yeah, as you say, then sounds like definitely more than a buzz. Could you give us kind of a rapid update? I know there's been, as you say, a lot of stuff going on in the news, but kind of some of those key facts and figures then in terms of deployments that we've seen so far today.
Before just moving on the deployments, another sign that the thing is exactly a little bit different than before is just with a couple of elements. When we launched the Council 3 years ago, the Hydrogen Council, the CEO-led organization, it was only 13 companies. At the last meeting we had in Versailles, just before the COVID lockdown, we were 81 members, and more than 60 CEOs were around the table. We've posted a couple of studies. One was the scaling up study, another one just recently called Cost Roadmap, Hydrogen Competitiveness, which we'll discuss later on. And since that, there's not been 1 month without a new study popping up in the market from financial players, from ONGs, from think tanks, from IEA, from agencies all over the place, which all acknowledge that hydrogen is a key systemic play. 18 countries today have hydrogen embedded into their energy transition policies. So that's the background, which makes that the vision has not spread all over the place. It's not enough, but it's moving well. In terms of deployments, I think we will get more in details with Andy and Seun, but basically, you've got around 1 gigawatt of announced power to gas projects need to be developed still, but they are on the go. You've got several hundreds of thousands of stationary use of fuel cell technologies, especially in Korea and Japan. And you've got, I would say, around 20,000 units of cars, bus, trucks running all over the place, mostly China, Korea, Japan, California, and a couple of thousand in Europe, mostly in Germany and northern part of Europe. You've got also very numerous projects coming on the CCS side, which is the mirror face of hydrogen from fossil energy with the sequestration of CO2. And in the northern Europe, you've got several key projects which are trying to develop massive carbon capture and storage technologies, and you've got some countries like Netherlands that are trying to build a hydrogen economy, shifting natural gas-based pipeline system into hydrogen-based systems. So those are all elements of real deployment moving on.
Sure. That's interesting. Then it looks like some are kind of starting to move and deployment is starting to happen. But what do you see as kind of the key bottlenecks then in continuing to move forward?
Well, first, everything needs to stay safe. We've been a couple of players developing the industry for the last decades. We did that safely because it's an energy, and as any energy, we cannot afford having any danger on any safety accidents. And that's going to be a challenge because we have many players that are moving, and the use of hydrogen will spread in many places. We think everything is in place to make it properly, but this is one of the key focus the Council has to follow in the coming years. Second, we need, of course, to decrease cost and to reach cost competitiveness. And what's also a sign that the industry is getting ready is that we've been capable to put forward together between all the sectors a cost roadmap. A cost roadmap which basically shows which applications are a potential to become cost competitive, not only with alternative energies, but also with fossil energies. And 18 of them out of 33 are basically capable to be competitive. And the recipe for it is scale. 50% reduction of the hydrogen cost at the pump for a car, for a bus, for a forklift is going to be the cost is going to be reduced by 50% on the hydrogen value chain, and that's because we will get scale in production and we will get scale in demand. Same for the fuel cell cost, and I think Seun and Andy might speak better than me on that. The fuel cell components, the reservoir components, are going to be dependent on the capacity to scale. For electrolysis, it's the same. The capacity to reduce the electrolysis-based hydrogen from a current 6 euros per kilo to around 3 euros per kilo is going to be a mix of reduction of the cost of energy and reduction of the capex. And the capex is going to be reduced by scale deployments. So if we manage to get the right scale projects in a couple of geographies, and that's coming in Korea, in Japan, in China, in some parts of Europe, and in California, and some other states in the US, if we manage to get those scale projects, then the cost will go down and the industry will become competitive and will not only decarbonize energy, but in a competitive way. And so now the industry is basically looking for the countries which are going to put in place the right policy tools to basically invest massively and become the first beneficiaries of the direct positive effects of that.
Sure. Yeah, no, I think that's a brilliant introduction, and thanks for that, Pierre-Etienne. As you say, I think it's probably a good time to bring in Sehoon at this point. And yeah, it'd be great to hear a little bit more, Sehoon, about kind of what you're doing at the Fuel Cell Center at Hyundai, and kind of what you think, kind of the role that you think hydrogen will play in ensuring kind of low carbon transport solutions in particular.
Well, as Pierre-Etienne said, as we have a large amount of production of hydrogen, we think the cost of hydrogen come down. What we are doing here in Hyundai is that we are developing fuel cell systems for fuel cell passenger cars and trucks and buses. What I can tell you is that when we made our first fuel cell system in 2013, the durability was only 4 or 5 years. So in the past, even in 2010 or 13, that time, we were not so confident about fuel cell stack technology, whether we can be durable enough or more durable than internal combustion engines. But today, our Nexo system, which is our second generation, we guarantee 10 years of durability. It is almost same as internal combustion engine, and we have no durability problem in passenger car area. The only things we left is we want to prove that fuel cell system is also can be used of the requirement of the trucks and buses. Most customers require 1 million kilometer driving range or more. So we are testing that, but it takes long time to verify because it takes long time. Even we have some acceleration mode. So the durability for passenger car is okay. Truck, we are studying and we are developing. I think we are quite confident that we can meet that. So the durability was the first issue why the fuel cell technology was not, provided to the public in a mass amount. And second is the cost issue. We have dramatically reduced the cost of fuel cell stack and the system. So when I started fuel cell technology in 2003 and 4, one fuel cell system, what we purchased from a US company was $1.2 million. So 1.2 million was more expensive than the best apartment in Gangnam area at that time. Yeah. We have that cost 1.2 million per system, the first one we purchased. And for how we improved the cost is that we have half the cost from our first generation to second generation. So you might know probably our Tucson fuel cell vehicle, the system in there. Now in the Nexo system is half of that. So we, like joke, we say if someone comes to us and asks to change the stack, of the Tucson, it should be cheaper to give an Nexo. Yeah. And what we are trying to do next time for our next generation is half the cost of the system, even more than half maybe. And the target is to be the same cost of the battery system. So if we want to, sell in abundant amount, and the fuel cell technology could be chosen by the customers, I think we have to have cost competitiveness compared to battery cars. And I'm very confident on that we can reach that level of the cost. The only thing which a little bit bothers, or it might take a little bit more time, is because there are some materials which chemical materials like ionomers, which is a chemical which is used for making the fuel cell membrane. Yeah, and these we do not, the chemical industry does not have abundant amount of this ionomers, because it is not because the material itself is rare, it is because we are not prepared. So the chemical industry did not thought that fuel cell demand will grow so fast. So we want to work with the chemical companies who provides ionomers, and if the ionomers get produced in a large amount, then I'm very confident we'll get the whole fuel cell system cost down below the battery system cost, including hydrogen tank also. Yeah, so I think that's the 2 points. What the automotive industry or fuel cell technology companies should do: reduce the cost and better the durability to be used everywhere, not only buses and trucks, but in the future, ships and trains, and even drones, flying taxis, or even,
And how you're utilizing this technology already.
Great. Well, thank you, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here today. So if you take a look back, let me tell you a little bit about Plug Power. About 10 years ago, our management team decided that we would focus our business in putting fuel cells in the forklift trucks. And we did that. You heard the discussions today about costs, and I'll meant to talk about that a bit. But we did that because it was truly a value proposition where fuel cells were superior to batteries in forklift trucks, especially in high throughput distribution centers and manufacturing facilities. Now, if you went into a Walmart facility, people have to take out these 2,000-pound batteries every 6 hours. It takes 15 or 20 minutes. Running with a fuel cell product, they have constant power. And about 7% of the distribution center was actually dedicated to a battery room. You put fuel cells in, and those issues go away. So we provide the customers not only the fuel cells that go in the forklift trucks, we have a very smart, network operations center that can look at all the units in the field in real time. We provide our service by leveraging technology, as well as the fact we built the hydrogen infrastructure. And we're doing this with people like Walmart, Amazon, BMW. These are big companies that are dedicating their operations to using fuel cells to make sure they deliver products to their customers. And you take a look, and you were asked about the virus. So I'm sitting here in Saratoga Springs, New York. As I think many of you know, it's hit New York very, very hard. But today, 30% of the food that goes on the table in the U.S. this morning will actually have touched the Plug Power forklift, fuel cell forklift truck along the way. Today, we have over 33,000 units in the field. And there are people like Walmart and Amazon. Those units will use today 30 tons of hydrogen fuel. It's as big as the plant that Pierre team's building with Air Liquide. We're using today 8-9% of the liquid hydrogen in the U.S. And that's why folks like Air Liquide are investing. Finally, we are, doing, we've done 27 million fuelings. So, if you're getting a package delivered from Amazon today, if you're shopping at a Walmart or a Wegmans or a Kroger, more than likely a Plug Power product touched that food that's on your table. And the technologies we've developed over the years, we've been on a 25% learning curve to drive down costs. So every time we doubled the amount of units in the field, our costs have come down by 25%. Some of that via vertical integration. We make our own MEAs. We're the largest manufacturer of MEAs in the U.S. So, this is a company that's, been critical in helping to build the fuel cell economy today, and it's critical to the national security of the United States.
That's really interesting, and I think as you say, kind of with conversation around kind of hydrogen being the future, I think it's really clear to see from the work that you guys have been doing that it's very much the now as well. I think kind of sticking on that same narrative, it might be interesting to come back to you, Sehun, and kind of ask then what your kind of wider vision is for plans of commercialization, be that kind of in Asia and in Europe, and how you see that developing kind of moving forward.
Okay. Actually, Korean government is supporting very strongly, and we are keeping increasing the production volume, but our volume is can only just fit the demand in Korea. Last year, we put about 5,000 vehicles in Korea, and this year we have to put about 10,000 of them. So it is great support from our government pushing the deployment and also building the hydrogen stations. So we already have our mass producing, and next year maybe we will produce more than 20,000. We are doubling every year almost. From here, I just want to emphasize something. Now there's some trend like you saw in Daimler truck and Volvo truck, making a commercial fuel cell system company. But what we think is we'll keep on going for passenger cars also. I think Toyota will do it the same way because we have experience of producing a lot of amount of stack and system. And we found out that if you don't have an abundant amount of production volume, it is very difficult to decrease the cost. So you cannot compare the production volume of passenger cars compared to trucks and buses. So if you only focus on truck and buses, it will take a long time to come to the level you satisfy. So for example, we can compare this a little bit with the internal combustion engine. In the internal combustion engine, you cannot use passenger car engine to truck because you cannot put two engines together. You have to develop, separate engine which is much bigger. But for fuel cell, you can put more stacks, and you can use the same technology from the passenger car and put it in the truck or buses. Only you can just modify a little bit membrane more stronger or catalyst more stronger, but it can be all used as the same thing could be used in the truck and buses. So now China, for example, China is when I see China's strategy, they are pushing passenger car with battery and truck and buses with fuel cell. But China has relatively a large amount, even trucks and buses. Yeah. But in Europe, I think if you only focus on truck and buses and you postpone the deployment of the passenger cars, it will take a long time, and you cannot get the effective cost reduction. So I think, Andy, you agree with me maybe, and I think that's why we have to do both and not just pick it up, just truck or bus, or that's not the right way. We have to find we have to do everything at the same time as the technology supports. Yeah.
Sure.
Thank you.
Sure. Yeah, I think that's interesting. Interesting to hear around kind of the importance of truck and buses, as well as the kind of consumer and passenger side of things. I think, as you say, potentially good to hand back over to Andy. Would you kind of agree with that? And kind of what do you think is needed next to kind of have the US continue to move at scale?
First, I agree with that. As I mentioned before, with us, volume not only allows you to drive down the basic material cost of material, it also drives design innovation, because as you get more and more products in the field, you've learned how to improve them and drive down costs. When I look at the U.S., I see three items. One is governmental commitment. Two is company commitment. And three, I'll say investor commitment. And on the governmental commitment, the U.S. Has had a healthy, when it comes to fuel cell products, a healthy tax credit in place for about the last decade. But that needs to be continued to scale the market. And I also, when I look at it, the work that, you've heard mentions about the importance of hydrogen. And there are sections of the tax code in the U.S. to support hydrogen infrastructure and hydrogen generation that we believe that needs to be strengthened. And as the U.S. moves into a time from where, the government policy is relief at the moment to really focusing on stimulus, we believe that hydrogen essentially is ultimately a lower cost solution and a much more stable cost solution than oil is today. And we think it's critical that the government supports the policies. I think companies are important. For me, my second largest customer is Amazon, and how we think about green hydrogen has a lot to do with the fact that Amazon and many of my customers have very aggressive sustainability goals. So large corporations and individuals who invest in those corporations and insist on sustainability will be very helpful for the market. Third, I think, comes down to the companies too. We have to go sell our pitch to Wall Street and sell our pitch to customers why fuel cells are a better alternative. If you look over the past 2 years, and I think a lot of credit goes to my two colleagues here on the table for the development of the Hydrogen Council, it has made it easier for companies like me to raise capital to help expand the business. And as companies, we need to continue to promote that. And we also need to continue to innovate and be willing to bring products to market and take some risks as we try to turn hydrogen, in the U.S. in the hydrogen study, we expect 14% of the energy in the U.S. by 2050, and to be hydrogen, and a great deal of that between now and then. And it's up to the company, and I think the two companies are here with me at the table. You listen to Hyundai and their deployment of cars around the world, and Air Liquide's investment in hydrogen and hydrogen infrastructure. The statement companies are willing to take that risk and build out this economy because they see the possibilities of what's going to happen.
Sure. That's three really interesting points you raised there. I think you kind of alluded to it a little bit with that first point, and into the second one as well, around kind of increasing companies' commitments to kind of decarbonisation and things like that as well. I think it plays quite nicely into that conversation on energy transition, and perhaps best to bring Pierre-Etienne back in at this point. I think what will be interesting to discuss really is what we really kind of, why do we need blue and green hydrogen? What's the issue here? And can you kind of talk a little bit more about how we can ensure that that's possible?
Yes, of course. So as you might know, today, around 75% of hydrogen is done with natural gas, and the rest of it is done mostly with coal in China. And of course, when you do hydrogen with natural gas, it's clean, but it's still emitting CO2. The global balance of that CO2 emissions compared to a diesel engine, if you move through all the chain, is still better because fuel cell technology is more efficient than a classical thermal engine. But still, you're still not solving the energy transition topic. So you need to get rid of the CO2. And there are basically a couple of ways to do so. And it happens that the fact that you need to capture CO2 or to do low CO2 hydrogen is the reason why hydrogen is becoming a systemic vector in the system, in the energy production of tomorrow. Because either you do low carbon hydrogen because you take your natural gas, you break it, and you capture the CO2 which is co-produced. And it's basically one of the easiest way to capture CO2 out of the feed of natural gas. And that's why it's a way to push the carbon capture and storage technologies. It's not too difficult to do. It's increasing a little bit the cost of hydrogen, but up to, I would say, an acceptable level. So we just need to find the places where you can sequestrate it, and you need to get the right regulations to do that. That's the first road. And that's the road that, of course, all the fossil players are trying to push, because it's a way for them to stay in the game. And I think it's very fundamental, because if you don't enable the fossil-based system to continue to work being clean, you're basically putting a very strong number of assets into a stranded situation, which is not acceptable. So it's a way to cope with the need to move to a clean energy system, but not destroying in a couple of years the existing energy production system. The other way around is to use renewable energy and to use low carbon energy like hydroelectric or nuclear. Hydroelectric being, of course, renewable as well. If you use that energy, which is by definition low carbon, and you break water through electrolysis, then you have hydrogen co-produced with oxygen, and the hydrogen is completely out of CO2 because the source of energy you've used is low carbon. The only issue is that's what we said before, is that this solution, which has been on the go for a long time, has not been very well developed over the past decades, and it's still very expensive and less efficient than just breaking natural gas. So this is where you've got most of the effort being done today to reduce the costs. And this is why we say that if you move to scale projects of electrolysis, massive electrolysis, you will decrease the cost of CapEx significantly, probably by 2 compared to today. And if you continue to have renewable energy coming at very low prices and in an abundant way, then you're also decreasing the variable part of the cost. And you can make hydrogen reach pricing which are of around 3 euros per kilo of production, which is 1.5 euros more than the classical natural gas-based solution. But if you compare those different routes, and if you put a penalty to the natural gas-based hydrogen with a CO2 tax or a CO2 cost, then basically all those production routes are coming more or less to the same level. That's why there is a kind of a convergence between those three ways: the classical one, which is still, of course, very efficient, but emitting CO2; the second one, which is capturing CO2; and the third one, which is using electrolysis to make hydrogen becoming competitive in the next 10 years. And this is why everybody is looking at it, and everybody is trying to invest and to make it work, because it's going to be tomorrow also one of the ways to use the maximum of your renewable energy. Because as you know, when you've got solar and wind, you've got intermittency that you need to manage, you've got seasonal difference between the winter and the summer, especially in the northern hemisphere countries. And so if you can store this energy massively and then reuse it for downstream sectors, then you basically have found a way to solve the whole sustainable energy issue. And this is why low carbon is fundamental, because this is what makes hydrogen a very key vector for the future.
Sure, absolutely. I think that kind of covers all those routes as well, really nicely. I know you kind of already alluded to it. Sorry, go on.
Maybe I would turn the light, if you agree, to Andy for 1 second, because I think he mentioned that. But Amazon, the Amazons, the Walmarts of the world, I guess they're all looking for green hydrogen now. I don't know yet if they're ready to pay the price for it, but they want it.
I would say, by the way, first, they do let's take Amazon. I think that's the best example. 3 years ago, I don't think many of the companies we sold to really thought about the difference between green hydrogen and hydrogen that comes from hydrocarbons. But as their investors in Amazon, as well as their leadership at Amazon, thought about the commitment long term and the impact of climate change, not only to future generations, but to their business in the future. That they've made real commitments to moving to sustainable solutions. One of the items, if you look at by year end, we'll be in about 35 Amazon distribution centers. And if you look at those distribution centers, the infrastructure now already exists, not only to support forklift trucks, but in many cases on-road vehicles. And they want that hydrogen ultimately to be green. And the only difference between filling that liquid hydrogen tank up with, called hydrocarbon hydrogen versus green is you just have a different delivery truck coming that happens to have green hydrogen. So they're in place, and now they want the source of that green hydrogen. And look, we're under, we're driven by making sure that 50% of the hydrogen we deliver to our customers by 2024 is green. That'll be 85 tons of hydrogen usage. So we want over 45 of that hydrogen to be green. And so it's not because I want green hydrogen, it's because people like Amazon and Walmart want it. And I would also add that I agree with Pierre-Etienne that they don't want to pay, but they are willing to pay a little premium. And I think that on top of that, in places where there are carbon taxes, it just makes it much more attractive when we look at models. So ultimately, we know the cost as the cost of electrolyzers come down, that the costs will be lower. The combination of electrolyzers and solar and wind power, that the cost of hydrogen will be lower than from hydrocarbons. And really, when I step back and see, it's really the same roadmap for vehicles. Because fundamentally, if you really look at it, a fuel cell electric vehicle should be lower cost ultimately than a internal combustion engine. I'm an electrical engineer, and I actually think I could design a electric car. You may not want to drive it out there, but I could probably design one. But if I was 25 or 30 years old, that's what I'd be doing for a living. Because I think it's an exciting world, the electrification of the world and the renewable world, and how the transportation sector and the energy sector eventually merge, and that's happening in front of us.
And I think, Owen, this is really where the countries that want to be the first one to benefit from this coming wave have a role to play. They need to help us through the regulation or fiscal or financial policies to price this difference in value from green to gray, so that it's feasible to pay the capex needed for that. And on the downstream part, and I think Korea is a good example of that, we need the states to help us through PPPs or funds dedicated to it to build this infrastructure, which is going to enable the vast distribution of hydrogen to the transport industry.
Well, I had an interview, I saw some article in Germany, for example, if Germany wants about, to start the deployment of the vehicles, the only cost for the hydrogen infrastructure is 50 kilometers of Autobahn cost. Yeah? And in Korea, we needed about 200 stations to start the deployment. And it will only cost about, 10 kilometers of highway. So actually, it is not a matter of cost. And I think we have seen the Corona situation. Corona we know that we can recover someday. It will take time. But once we have this climate change and global warming, it will accelerate and it will not come back. And we'll be in a very dangerous situation. So sometimes we talk about climate change, yeah, but sometimes we see too much economically. Yeah, it is dead or alive. But when we talk about hydrogen cost, we always talk about not economic or something like that. But what is more important, survive or a little bit more cost? So I think we should.
That's a very good one. Yeah, and it's true that the cost. Go ahead, Andy.
So I'm a little bit of a dreamer, probably because I grew up doing wireless, and I was a power supply designer, and I can remember working on one of the first analog wireless systems in 1982, and the cost of the power system I designed today is about 1/25th of the cost of what I worked on. And I think what happened is you got scale, you got volume. And I actually believe with scale and volume and government support now, ultimately the base cost of hydrogen fuel cells, of hydrogen vehicles will be lower than the traditional technologies today. And, I've seen that innovation in my lifetime. And, we're going through it again. And I'm really fortunate that I saw one revolution when I was a young man, and I'm seeing another revolution when I'm in late middle ages. So it's really where we are in this hydrogen industry. And quite honestly, what it reminds me of is 1992 in wireless, when it was about to take off. And I think over the next 3-4 years, this industry is about to take off. And I'm just so happy that I have a chance to participate.
And so are we all. And I think to close the loop on those vision and cost, it's true that we should not forget that I take the French way now. We had the capacity at the time to build the nuclear industry or to build the TGV. But today, building the infrastructure in the French territory, transfer hydrogen, would cost only half of the Paris-Bordeaux TGV line. So we're speaking about figures which, in fact, are not so huge on what you need to debottleneck to get the full industry moving. And this is what needs to be done now, because this is where the investments, the jobs, and the technologies are going to come.
Sure, that's really interesting. I think so.
Yeah, and I just, I told one of my engineers to gather all the costs the governments are spending because of coronavirus. It was about 7,700 billion. And what we calculated in the Hydrogen Council, what we need to transfer the technology for 10 years, only 450 billion, something like that. So it's just a really tiny amount of money we need, yeah. Compared to the U.S. spending 4,000 billion, just give some salary, yeah. Compared to that, it's just a tiny amount of money, and I think what is important is the mindset and the decision whether we go or not. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think there's a lot of kind of really positive feedback on that kind of discussion, and a few questions coming in kind of around that. I know this is going to be a big question for you guys, but I think playing back into what Sehun mentioned just moments ago, which one do you pick, guys? Do you pick cost? Do you pick climate crisis? Or do you envision a world then where at some point we won't actually have to make that decision?
I'll take it first. I guess you probably heard that I believe the world ultimately gets to the point where you don't have to make a decision, but there needs to be a transition. Look, we talked about cost. I've seen estimates that the U.S. spends incredible amount of dollars protecting the oil lanes, and I would kind of say I would like to see some of that money transferred to protecting the oil lanes to help transition to clean energy. And the government and companies can help us get to scale, where you reach the point where assistance or higher prices aren't required. And and ultimately, that has benefits to climate change. It also has benefits to users to have lower costs. And so I think that's a false choice. I think you achieve both if you plan and have the right support systems in place near term, so that ultimately long term, you have a lower cost, more efficient, cleaner technology.
Sure. Did anyone else want to pick up on that point?
So maybe one comment also. When you're developing hydrogen in your territory, you're buying yourself energy independence, resilience, and local added value, local value. If you buy 100 of oil for your car, in many places, 90 euros you need to import and is showing your energy independence. If tomorrow you buy 100 euro of hydrogen for your car, 90 euros will be locally created value just for the production, the distribution, the conditioning of it. Second, when you start to develop a completely new energy system using hydrogen, you're buying yourself versatility, because hydrogen is a way to either use fossil energy or renewable energy. And then you're developing technologies to basically embed the use of energy into your system. And so in the share of the value of fuel, which is hydrogen fuel, the part of the pure energy is very small, and most of it is basically human activity. It's technologies, it's capital, it's assets that you're investing in the territory. So when you're developing hydrogen, you're building your resilience for tomorrow, you're building your energy independence, and you're building your jobs and technologies for tomorrow.
Sure. I think kind of a lot of this conversation has kind of talked about the timeline and kind of routes to commercialization. Taking this from kind of this wider energy transition point that we've been discussing just now, what do you think the timeline looks like for transition and for kind of full realization of the things that we have been discussing? I know, obviously, Andy, that there's that's kind of already in place for you to some extent, but from a wider transition point of view, how do you see that timeline, guys?
Well, I think that I think Pierre Team started out by talking about the hydrogen cost study and the identification of 15 applications where fuel cells make sense over the next 10 years. We're in one of the first ones, fuel cells, moving goods in forklift trucks. I think it's really clear when you look at battery electric vehicles, and if you're in the delivery business and have to have any range, that fuel cells are a better solution. So I see more and more from engagement, because we have applications in other areas, and in 3 to 5 years, that'll be, those markets will develop. I do agree that to get real volume, vehicles on road are important to drive the volume and to drive down cost ultimately. But I think that over the next 5 years, honestly, if I look at my company, we'll do 300 million in gross bookings this year. We'll do over $1 billion by 2024, and we'll be continuing to grow at that rate. So to many of us, it's real. And you can see, there's other public companies that it's really visible to, that their market valuations are increasing, their revenues increasing. So for many of us, this business is real today. And I think if you ask Walmart, as they move 30% more goods than they did during the Christmas season, that's really real to them today. So that's how I kind of think about it.
Well, in my view, in the automotive industry, there is regulations. So in 2025, the EU CO2 regulation will be about 81 grams per kilometer. And 59 gram in 2030. But that is one regulation, but there's already many cities like Paris and some countries like Norway, Netherlands, who says they will not registrate any more internal combustion engine cars. So I think 2030 probably will be some kind of turning point, and it will start from 25, I think. So if you have a strong regulation, diesel cars or trucks not anymore can come into the cities or things, you will immediately recognize that there is no other option. The human doesn't have any other technology except for fuel cell for big trucks to deliver long distance. Yeah, I think small cars, passenger cars, battery and fuel cell can coexist, but for 40-ton trucks, it will be very difficult. So actually, I really want to see some electric trucks, battery electric trucks, which drives 500 kilometer, but I don't think I can see it. But I'm waiting. Yeah. Okay. So if you see a little bit big picture, I think 2030 will be the turning point.
It's going in wave. In order to have 2030 a mature market up and running with massive demand in several countries, you need to have the first large series in 2025. And in order to be able to feed those series, it being for industries or for transportation, you need to start investing now. This is what we are doing already. If you take our investment in California, our investment in Canada for a large PEM electrolyzer, in California, it's large liquid plant. If you take our competitors' investments in Korea or in China, those are a couple of €100 million of investment. So we clearly are betting for a massive demand growth. If we take our taxi supported initiative in Paris, it's only today 130 cars. The plan is to be 600 taxis by the end of the year, or maybe mid next year, and then a couple of thousand. This is real case. If you take the biggest payer of taxi in Paris is a 15,000 taxis in 3 years. If we want to walk the talk, we can be several thousand taxis, so one of the key players there. And then it's just a question of replication. So it's a collective will, because the technologies are ready. As you can go and visit an Amazon forklift fuel system by plug, or you can go on run into an EXO or use one of our stations, which is fueling cars in many countries. We have 60 of those. It's real life. The only issue now is a collective will between us, investors, and policymakers to just move it to scale.
Yeah, actually, Hyundai's production target in 2030 is 500,000. So it will not just start at 20. As Pierre-Etienne said, I think most of the companies will start. Now only Toyota and Hyundai is pushing for this fuel cell technology very strongly. But I think most of the companies should start by 25. BMW also said 23. I don't know exact year, but it will be all around there, because we will realize there is not another technologies to solve all the mobility solutions. And in order to do that, we really need infrastructure invest before that, because when we first deployed our Tucson vehicles, I didn't see the customers. I didn't find the customer. I only counted the hydrogen station numbers. Then it is your sales number. So we for vehicle OEM, we really are waiting for the worldwide infrastructure before it is too late. Yeah.
I'm going to just step in and brag.
Sure.
We've built 90 infrastructures. you could actually drive a vehicle across the United States and stop at Amazon and Walmart distribution centers if they let you in. And you could drive from Lewiston, Maine, all the way out to Los Angeles, California. And there are Plug Power stations along the way. There's 90 of those industrial stations today. There'll be 120 by the time we talk at the end of next year, and there'll be 500 on the map by 2024. And these stations are, all of them, almost all of them have an outside fueling station associated with them. So I look at the amount of hydrogen we have just stored on site. I mentioned we use about 30 tons a day. There's probably about 250 tons stored on site of liquid hydrogen, equal to the whole U.S. capacity. There is a network today. It's invisible to many, but quite honestly, it's not invisible to Walmart. It's not invisible to Amazon. And, probably that's why when I see what we've done and knowing that what others are doing, I'm probably a little bit more optimistic that infrastructure will be in place sooner rather than later, at least in the United States.
Please let me know where are the Amazon and Walmart stations.
I will.
It seems you managed to develop a deal between two companies now within the Reuters podcast, so I'm not sure if it was.
Good customers from it.
That's really interesting. And then I think, as you say, kind of seeing it from your side, that optimism is, it shines through from you as well, which is brilliant. I'm aware that we're kind of running out of time now, unfortunately. I know we could probably continue these conversations all day, but Pierre-Etienne, is there anything else you'd like to add before we end? And then obviously I'll come to Sehun and Andy as well.
Well, I think as many people said, of course, post-COVID will not be a complete new era, but what is for sure is that hydrogen technologies are one of the key waves that was started before COVID and should accelerate after COVID, because it's going to serve many of the purposes that we need to solve when we see the consequences of that very tough crisis that we're facing now. So hydrogen is the way to go, and we just need to accelerate now.
Okay, for me, I think the mission what we have is to show that the technology is ready for all type of transportation, means, and we have to also show that the cost could be competitive. So I'm not sure in my time I can make it cheaper than internal combustion engines, but I think in my time I think we can get lower than the battery electric vehicles. So I'll try my best on that. Thank you.
So I was invited here today to talk about hydrogen economy being real today. I would just step back and remind the audience, if you're receiving an order from Amazon today, it probably was touched, a good chance it was touched by a vehicle that was powered by hydrogen along the way. 1/3 of the people almost who were sitting down to eat this morning for breakfast, actually their breakfast was touched somewhere along the line by a hydrogen vehicle. So to me, I think to many of my customers, the hydrogen economy is not a dream of the future, it's a reality of today.
Sure. What a great way to end as well. But as I say, that will be all we have time for. There are a host of questions that we weren't able to get to, so I'm sorry if we didn't get to yours. Massive thanks once again to Pierre-Etienne, Sehun, and Andy, all for coming on today and kind of sharing their insights and taking their time out. Thank you also to the Hydrogen Council as well for their collaboration on this session. All the recordings are going to be available. I'll send them out to everybody next week. And as I mentioned previously, we'll be kind of conducting some exclusive executive interviews over the next month, as well as our Build Back Better virtual symposium on July 8th. So as I say, watch out for that. Again, thanks to the panelists for tuning in, and thanks to everybody who's tuned in today and for the rest of the series. Stay safe, everyone, and thank you, and goodbye.
Okay, bye-bye, everyone.
Bye now. Bye.
Yeah. Bye-bye, Andy.
Bye, everybody.
Good day, good night.
Oh, dear.